Hello and welcome back to Literature with Jaisal. Today we enter a world where nothing exists outside the text. No author or history, only words. This is New Criticism. New Criticism is a formalist approach to literary analysis. Formalist approach is one which focuses on the form of the text, that insists on treating the literary work as a self-sufficient, autonomous object. Emerging in the early 20th century in Britain and the United States, it marked a decisive shift away from the earlier modes of criticism that relied heavily on historical context, authorial biography, or moral interpretation. So, the earlier forms of criticism relied on the historical background or the author's biography for analysis of a text. But this approach shifted the focus to the text and the form itself. Now, the new critics argued that the meaning of a text resides entirely within its formal and linguistic structure. This principle is often described as the autonomy of the text. A poem or novel is not a reflection of the author's life nor a production of its time, but a carefully constructed verbal artifact that must be analyzed on its own terms. This approach brought a new level of rigor and discipline to literary studies, making interpretation more systemic and text centered. Again, the same thing. A central practice of new criticism is close reading. Come, let's find out what it is. Close reading requires the critic to examine diction, syntax, imagery, symbolism, rhythm, and structure in order to uncover layers of meaning. Rather than summarizing the content, the critic analyzes how the text produces meaning through its internal organization. This method assumes that every word and structural choice contributes to the overall effect of the work. This method was developed by I.A. Richards. I.A. Richards was instrumental in formalizing the principles of new criticism through his works Principles of Literary Criticism and Practical Criticism, very important works. His method of practical criticism involved presenting poems to his students without any contextual information, thereby eliminating external influences on interpretation. So he gave poems to his students without revealing the age in which these poems were written or their author or the writer of these poems. And asked his students to interpret the poem by focusing on close reading and other factors. Another important theory given by Richards is the theory of meaning based on four components: sense, feeling, tone, and intention. Extremely important from the net point of view as well. Sense refers to the literal meaning of the words, while feeling captures the emotional coloring of the text. Tone indicates the speaker's attitude towards the reader, and intention refers to the purpose embedded within the text itself, not the author's personal intention. This one point you need to remember, guys, that it's not the author's personal intention that is in focus here, but the purpose embedded within the text itself. Next, we move on to William Empson and the theory of ambiguity. William Empson expanded the scope of new criticism through his concept of ambiguity, as elaborated in very important work, Seven Types of Ambiguity. Empson argued that ambiguity is not a flaw but a fundamental feature of literary language. So, what does ambiguity even mean? Ambiguity is the quality of language that permits more than one meaning or interpretation. According to William Empson, ambiguity is a source of literary richness because it allows different meanings to coexist within a text. Now, to give you an idea, I'll discuss a few of these types. These are not very important, so I'll not discuss all seven. But the first type is a word or phrase has several related meanings all at once. For example, the word fair can mean beautiful. It can also mean just and pleasing. Second type, Two or more meanings combine into one effect. For example, rose can suggest both beauty and love. Third type of ambiguity, when two unrelated meanings exist simultaneously. For example, the word roots can mean both ancestry and plant roots. So I guess it is clear now. Moving on to John Crowe Ransom. It's a very important name in the field of new criticism because he is credited with formally establishing this theory. In his works, such as The New Criticism and The World's Body, he introduced the distinction between structure and texture. Very simple, listen carefully. Structure refers to the overall organization of a literary work, including its plot and thematic arrangement, while texture pertains to the detailed use of language, imagery, and stylistic devices. So, structure refers to plot and thematic arrangement, while texture uses language, imagery, and stylistic devices. Alright, so Ransom argued that both elements are equally important and must be analyzed together to fully understand a text. Next, we have Alan Tate and the concept of tension. So, Alan Tate introduced this concept of tension to describe the dynamic interplay of opposing forces within a literary text. Tension arises from the coexistence of conflicting ideas, emotions, and images, which together create a unified and complex whole. For example, a poem may simultaneously express love and loss, joy and sorrow, or certainty and doubt. Rather than resolving these contradictions, the text sustains them, producing a richer and more nuanced meaning. Tate's concept of tension highlights the complexity of literary works and reinforces the new critical emphasis on internal coherence. Easy. So let's now move on to Cleaneth Brooks and his ideas of paradox and the heresy of paraphrase. Through his works, The Well-Wrought Urn and Understanding Poetry, very important works, I tell you, Brooks argued that poetry is inherently paradoxical, meaning that it often expresses truth through seemingly contradictory statements. Paradox for Brooks is not a decorative device, but a fundamental principle of poetic language. He also introduced the concept of the heresy of paraphrase, which warns against reducing a poem to a simple summary. According to Brooks, paraphrasing destroys the complexity and unity of a poem by stripping away its formal and linguistic richness. A poem must be experienced as a whole and not translated into prose. Moving on to Wimsatt and Beardsley's concept of intentional and effective fallacies. Fallacy is an error. So, the intentional fallacy argues that a critic should not base interpretation on the author's intended meaning, as this intention is often inaccessible or irrelevant. Instead, the focus should remain on the text itself. The effective fallacy, on the other hand, warns against judging a text based on the reader's emotional response. Personal reactions are subjective and vary from reader to reader, making them unreliable as a basis for interpretation. So, intentional fallacy is an error where the reader interprets a text based on the author's intentions. An effective fallacy is an error in which the reader interprets a text based on the effect the text has on the reader. Alright, very simple, very clear. Now let's discuss the two schools of new criticism, the Cambridge School and the Chicago School. The Cambridge School played a foundational role in shaping new critical methods, particularly through its emphasis on linguistic precision and detailed textual engagement. Now, you need to remember these names, the rest we have already discussed. Figures such as I.A. Richards, William Empson, F.R. Leavis, and Q.D. Leavis contributed significantly to the development of close reading as a disciplined practice. Richards, in particular, revolutionized literary study by introducing experiments in practical criticism where students were asked to analyze texts without any contextual information, like we already discussed. moving on to the Chicago School. Now, this is important, and the members are important as well from net point of view. The Chicago School approached literature through a broader structural and philosophical lens, drawing heavily on Aristotelian principles. Key figures such as R.S. Crane, Wayne C. Booth, Alder Olson, Richard McKeown, and Bernard Weinberg emphasized elements such as plot, genre, and overall form. While they did not reject close reading entirely, they criticized new criticism. Very important. They criticized new criticism for being overly narrow in its focus on language and imagery. Instead, the Chicago critics advocated for a more holistic analysis that considers the total structure of a work, including its narrative design and rhetorical purpose. Thank you all for watching.